Good morning. Greetings in Jesus' precious name. It is good to be here this morning. I am looking forward to our time together. And just excuse me, I think I need to go and get a cord here. While we wait for this to begin, our text we will take out of the book of Nehemiah today. Nehemiah chapter 4. It has been a privilege for myself to be spending some time in this book during this winter and this past winter, and there have been a number of lessons that the Lord has taught me. And so before we go into the lesson, the message, I'd like to begin with a story. I was born in the Cuauhtemoc, Mexico area, and as a young boy, I was on the farm with my dad. We had a mixture of dairy cows and grain farming that we did. And I remember this one particular year, we had a good crop on the field. The Lord had blessed us with timely rains, and it looked like we would have an exceptionally good crop of pinto beans for that year. I think this was sometime in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. I'm a little fuzzy on exactly what year it was. And I was a young boy, around the age of 10 years old. And as harvest was approaching, the way back then, it might still be the same way, I'm not sure, but you would cut 2 rows of beans at a time. You have some sort of tool hooked onto the tool, 3-point hitch of the tractor, and there'd be these knives that would cut the roots of the beans and kind of bring them together, 2 rows at a time. And then a second tractor would follow and rake beans into a swath. And then along you would come with the combine later on and you'd combine the beans. And so it was, because it was supposed to be a good crop, there was something that I had always wanted. A number of my friends had a 4-wheeler or a 3-wheeler, and I would have really liked to have one as well. And so that year, my dad promised me that if our average yield for the crop will be 500 kgs an acre, if that's what we're going to average at, then I will have enough money to buy a 3-wheeler, 4-wheeler for the farm. And that is an exception. For that time, that was an exceptional average, the way it is in my mind. And so we started out. And my job that year, along with my brothers and cousins, was to walk behind the tractor with the rake and whatever beans had not been cut, to pull them out of the ground and throw them onto the swath. And so it was hard work for a young boy like me to walk behind the tractor and a rake and pull out these beans that had been left behind. And I would do this day after day after day. But I was getting a few pesos per row that I was covering, and so as I was walking along, I was counting my pesos that I was making here, and at the same time also remembering that the more beans I pull out of the grounds, the cleaner we can get our field, the better the chance will be that our average will be 500 kgs an acre, and there would be a significant reward by my dad being able to buy the 4-wheeler. And I remember after a few weeks of harvest, we got to this particular field, and something about the soil made it very difficult for this tool that my dad was using to properly cut the roots of the beans. And so as I was following the tractor with the rake, it seemed like hardly any of the beans had been cut and raked into the swath. It was so much that needed to be pulled out. And because of the soil, it was dry and it was hard, the way it is in my memory. It was just an incredible task ahead of me. And I was tired, physically tired. I'd been doing this job in the hot sun for a couple of weeks. And here I had these 40 acres that it just looked like an insurmountable mountain. And I remember coming to the end of the field, and my mom was there, and she was bringing us supper, and I just broke down and I cried, and I just couldn't take it anymore. My strength was gone. And it's like, Mom, I just can't do this anymore. I'm tired. I'm discouraged. All of a sudden, those pesos and the four-wheeler or the three-wheeler didn't seem worth it anymore. And my mom and dad were very gracious. They understood, and they hired some additional help to come and help us. And at the end of the harvest, you're all curious now, did I get my four-wheeler? No, because our average was 453 kgs an acre. And so I never got that three-wheeler or four-wheeler. So all the hard effort, it wasn't worth it. Yeah, it was worth it, but I never got the three-wheeler. Why am I telling this story? In life, we are faced with discouragement sometimes. And as I was studying this book of Nehemiah, Nehemiah, we often think about it as a book on leadership. And for the purpose of the study, I tried to come up with a meaning or a definition for leadership, because the book of Nehemiah was not only put in there for like a church leader or a school teacher. And the definition that I came up with for leadership is this: you see a need and you do something about that need. And so you see a need. Your child needs a clean pair of clothes, so you do something about it. That's a form of leadership. You see your neighbor could, due to some health crisis, could use some extra help. And so you go and you do something about it. You help out. That's a form of leadership. God reveals to you a particular need, and you do something about that. That's a form of leadership. And that's what we have here in the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah is totally content in his job in serving the king Nebuchadnezzar out in Babylon. Let me just make sure it was King Nebuchadnezzar. King Artaxerxes, sorry. It's King Artaxerxes that he is serving. And he's a cupbearer. He has a good job. And his physical brother comes back from Jerusalem, and he has a very simple question. The same kind of question you or I ask someone that returns from where we used to live. How are the people there? How are they doing there? And his brother Hanai says, it's difficult. It's difficult. The people in Jerusalem are struggling. And they're struggling especially because in the area of their wall that's supposed to protect them, and the wall is a reflection of the strength of the God of that city. It's not there. And when Nehemiah hears that, it says he breaks down and he cries, and he takes it to the Lord in prayer. So he heard about a need. It causes him to pray about it, and then he sets out to meet that need. And in this case, it is building this wall around Jerusalem. Another man, Thomas Edison, we are the beneficiaries of a number of his inventions, but a lot of his life was spent trying something and it failed, and he'd try something more and it would fail. One of the inventions of Thomas Edison is the light bulb, and so this morning we are beneficiaries of Thomas Edison, his desire to get a light bulb designed. He had many failures along the way. And his son reports that later on in his life, Edison is in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, and they're struggling financially as a family because all of Edison's money is going into these failed experiments. And he'd come up with some new idea and try, see if that would work, and it would fail. And again, there would be failure. The only reason they were able to survive is because there was a few of his inventions had been successful, and he was able to use those inventions to pay for his living expenses and hopefully generate enough income to make to come up with new ideas. And so this one night, they get the news that their building, where they have these two or three successful inventions working for them, is on fire. And it's burning to the ground. And then the son reports that he's wondering, I'm wondering how my dad will respond to this. He knew the difficulties that they were going through financially. All of a sudden, he hears his dad calling, "Hey, son, do you know where mom is? Have you seen mom anywhere?" And, well, go tell mom to come here and make sure she invites all of her friends to come as well, because there will never be a beautiful fire like this again as his building is burning down. Perspective. He's not discouraged. And his son reports how as soon as basically the last flame was put out, he was already putting men at work, saying, you need to rent this type of equipment to make sure that we can rebuild again. And then his son says, and to his amazement, he found a table, kind of like a picnic table, all exhausted from a nightlight, like a long night of watching his work go down in flames and planning to rebuild again. And he takes his jacket and wraps it into a bit of a pillow and puts it on the table. And as he lays down on the table, just before he lays down on the table, "Oh, and could someone please let me know where you could find some money?" And then he falls asleep. Not discouraged at all. Not discouraged at all. You know, in life, like I said, we will find situations where we are dealing with discouragement. Nehemiah dealt with discouragement. Nehemiah dealt with a lot of opposition. And so the title for the message this morning is Discouragement. What causes discouragement, and how can we overcome discouragement in our lives? I'm guessing if I were to ask you to raise your hand, I won't do that, but you can think of a time or two where you tried to do something, and you had great vision, great ambition, and you started the project, whatever it was, and you got into it and you realized that this is a whole lot more work than what I had thought this was going to be. Or this is a whole lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. Or maybe you tried something in Sunday school as a Sunday school teacher among the youth group, and you realize, oh, this is a lot harder to convince everyone that this is a good idea than what I had thought. Maybe there was even opposition, and you started off well, but somewhere along the line you realize this is the task is much greater than what I had set out to do, and you're faced with discouragement. Just to make sure that we have a bit of a picture of the wall that Nehemiah was going to build, it was 4,000 meters long, which is about 2.5 miles. The average height was 12 meters, which is 39.4 feet. The average thickness of this wall was 8.2 feet or 2.5 meters. And along the way, there was 34 watchtowers and 10 gates. And so I tried to scale it a little bit. So you see that the wall size where the horse is on top, that's according to the wall size, the horse is an actual size. So it gives you a bit of a picture. A horse could easily turn around on the wall. And then to the left, I have a bar that's kind of the height of a 170 horsepower loader farm tractor. Anyway, I'm hoping it gives you a bit of a picture. This is a massive project. This wall it's tall, it's wide, and it's long. And so this was a big project. Now I'd like for us to turn to, you have your Bibles open to Nehemiah chapter 4, and so let's begin to read. But it so happened when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall that he was furious and very indignant and mocked the Jews. And he spoke before his brethren in the army of Samaria and said, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they fortify themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they complete it in a day? Will they revive the stones from the heaps of rubbish, stones that are burnt?" Now Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, "Whatever they build, if even a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall." Verse 4, how does Nehemiah respond to this mocking of Sanballat and Tobiah the Ammonite? He says, Hear, O our God, for we are despised. Turn their reproach on their own heads and give them as plunder to a land of captivity. Do not cover their iniquity, and do not let their sin be blotted out from before you, for they have provoked you to anger before the builders. So we built the wall, and the entire wall was joined together up to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. And so here we have Nehemiah. He is working, and the people have a mind to work, it says, and they are halfway done. They are halfway done with the wall. And Sanballat, who has been in the previous chapters, comes again and again, and he tries to get in the way of this wall being built. And he tries to discourage the diligent Jews who are working here. And Sanballat, along with his friend Tobiah the Ammonite, they are there, and they mock Nehemiah and the people, the Jewish people. And they make fun of them, and they say, your work, what you're doing here, it's not that great. What do you think you're doing here? You're not even builders, it seems like. And the materials that you're using, these burnt rocks and all this rubbish, this debris, this is... And then Tobiah finally says, and even if they manage to build something, if a fox will get on it, it will all come tumbling down. So a public form of mocking. But we see Nehemiah, it somehow doesn't affect him at all. He just brings it to the Lord. And he says, Lord, you hear what's going on here? And I'm praying you, God, that you will take care of Sanballat and Tobiah. I'm just trusting you. I'm just trusting you. I'm just going to allow you to deal with them. And it seems like the mockery didn't even impact the rest of the people at all. It says in verse 6, so we built the wall, and the entire wall was joined together up to half its height. So they're halfway done. We have a 20-foot wall here. For the people had a mind to work. It was not interrupting their work. They kept on working. They did not lose sight of what they wanted to do. And I find that this is probably true in our lives as well. As Christians, we find it's not that difficult. No, we don't like it. But if a non-believer, the Sanballats and the Tobiahs in our lives, we share our faith, we try to do something for the Lord, and if there's a non-believer that mocks us, makes fun of us, we don't like it, it's not fun, but it doesn't really impact us. Doesn't really bring that much discouragement into our lives. We rest in this, in the verses of comfort that we find. Count it all joy if you suffer for Christ's name. And it's almost like a comfort to us when non-believers are against some of the things that we do. And we see the same thing here. The Sanballats, the Tobiahs, they were not part of the God's people or the Jewish people, and their mocking, their words had very little impact on Nehemiah and the people that were at work. It's just kept on. They just kept on working. People trusted in God. People trusted that God would take care of their enemies, the enemies of God. But then we get to verse 10. We'll skip a few verses there, and then we will get to verse 10. Then Judah said, the strength of the laborers is failing, and there is so much rubbish that we are not able to build the wall. And our adversaries said they will neither know nor see anything till we come into their midst and kill them and cause the work to cease. So it was, when the Jews who dwelt near them came, that they told us 10 times, from whatever place you turn, they will be upon us. Therefore I positioned men behind the lower parts of the wall at the openings, and I set the people according to their families with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked and arose and said to the nobles, to the leaders, and to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord great and awesome, and fight. Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, great and awesome, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. Something happened. It says in verse 10, now Judah said. Who was Judah? Who was Judah? The wall is halfway complete. It's up to half of its height, as we find in verse 6. The mocking and the criticism that they have received from Sanballat and Tobiah has not had huge impact on them. But then Judah comes on to the scene. Who is Judah? Judah says, the strength of the laborers is failing. There is so much rubbish that we are not able to build the wall. So the question is, who is Judah? Who is Judah? Let's explore. We read in Genesis chapter 49 that when Jacob gathered his sons for their blessing, we remember in Genesis chapter 49, Jacob is an old man. He has been blessed by being able to meet Joseph at the end of his life. They are in Egypt. Jacob knows that he is about to pass away. And he calls his sons together, his sons together, and he wants to bless them. And then in that blessing, we get to verse 8. And you're going, and I think in verse 8 of chapter Genesis 49, it says, you're going to be a leader among the family. Your brothers will praise you. He says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet until Shiloh comes. The word Shiloh in this instance, I'm pretty sure or convinced it is referring to the Messiah. Judah, you will be the tribe that will bring the Messiah. This Messiah that the Jewish people are looking forward to, the promised Messiah. He's going to come through your tribe. He's going to come through your family line, Judah. This is who you are. The scepter will never depart from you. And to him, this is to Shiloh, shall be the obedience of the peoples. These people of Judah were to be respected because they were the chosen ones through whom the Lord Jesus would someday be born. And so here we have this Judah, this family of Judah, these respected people, the ones that everyone is aware of, whoever is familiar with the Jewish history up to that point. Jacob has said that the Messiah is going to come through your family line. And so we have that respected family is coming to Nehemiah, and they're bringing bad news. It tells us, Nehemiah chapter 4:10 here, it says, Nehemiah tells us that Judah of all people is bringing discouraging words to the Jews. And this is what he says. And Judah said, the strength of the laborers is failing. See, I'd like to back up a little bit here. There's discouraging news. Judah is bringing discouraging news. This respected family is bringing discouraging news. And we find later on here in these verses, it says that the people of Judah were living close to the camp of the Sanballat's people and Tobiah's people. They were living close to the area where their enemies were. And they were overhearing the things that their enemies were plotting to do against them. And so their daily intake was this negative news. This daily intake in their lives was this negative influence. And so that negative influence, that negativeness, these bad news, it was bringing down their courage. It was discouraging them to the point where they brought that news to Nehemiah as well. And it says they came to him 10 times to repeat again and again that something's going to happen, something bad is going to happen. And they bring 4 causes of discouragement. The first cause, or I should say, you cannot constantly hear negative news without having some of it rub off on you. So it's important that we are careful with what we fill our lives in, our thought life. What is it that we consume on a day-to-day basis? See, that's what brought Judah to the point of being discouraged himself and spreading that discouragement to the rest of the Jews. It was his exposure to negativeness, something that caused his faith to waver in God. But anyway, the 4 causes of discouragement: a loss of strength. We see the word failing here. Then Judah said, the strength of the laborers is failing. The original text here would say the word failing has the concept of stumbling or staggering. These people, Judah is saying, these people, Nehemiah, have been working a long time and they are getting tired. How long have they been building this wall? Verse 6 tells us that they're halfway through. The wall was joined together at half its height. The newness had worn off. That may make it even more practical. Remember my story, and as I began, the newness of picking these beans out of the dirt had worn off. It was no longer exciting. Those few pesos that I was earning along the way, they had lost its appeal. The newness had worn off. The vision that I had originally had, that original zeal, had wavered. Or sometimes maybe we buy a new vehicle and we buy it on payments. And so yes, it's very exciting to drive this vehicle that we have bought. But long before that final car payment has been made, the newness is gone. Or sometimes, as young parents, we have a new baby, and it's so exciting to have this newborn child in our arms, and to just dream and pray and just envision this life for the young child. But then after sleepless nights, many changed diapers, lots of hard work, all of a sudden, mom and dad get tired. They're just tired. And there's no longer that vision, that excitement. It's just hard work. Same thing is happening here. We're getting tired, Nehemiah. The strength of those who have been working is failing. A loss of strength, physical strength, always will take a toll on our bodies. So first thing, physically, they were getting tired. Second thing, that the news that Judah is bringing to them is a loss of vision. You notice that in verse 10 where it says, after the phrase, the strength of the laborers is failing, and then he says, and there is so much rubbish. There is so much rubbish. Was there more rubbish this morning than there had been 2 weeks ago? No, most likely there was less rubbish than there had been 2 weeks ago, because they've been working. They've had a mind to work for the last 2 weeks. But this morning, all of a sudden, there is so much rubbish. There's so much junk that needs to be cleaned up. Look around. Our strength has failed us. And look at all the garbage, all the burnt rocks, all the concrete pieces that are still here that need to be cleaned up. There is so much more work to be done. They had lost vision. See, they had taken their eyes off of the end goal. The end goal was that they would have a city that had a finished wall, and their wives and their children would be safe in the city while they as men walked outside and worked on the fields. That was the original vision. God had brought Nehemiah there. God had brought him there. He testifies of that in chapter 2 of Nehemiah, how the Lord has been with us. The king Artaxerxes has said he will supply the materials that we need. It's an exciting new project. Just imagine how good life will be once this wall is completed. And so everyone is on board. They're starting to work because they have the vision, the end goal in mind. But all of a sudden, one morning, they're no longer looking at the vision. They're looking at the rubbish. And they lose sight of what they had set out to do. All they could see that morning was not the potential, but they could see the dirt. They could see all the stones that still needed to be moved. The loss of vision. Second thing, our third thing, is a loss of confidence. So they physically tired. They've lost their vision. They're no longer thinking about what God has called them to do. They're just looking at the dirt, at the rocks. And they lose confidence. They say, and we are not able to build the wall. Maybe the most devastating cause of a discouragement in our lives is if we lose confidence. Nehemiah's workers became tired, lost vision. The wall was halfway up. All these rocks and rubbish was strewn everywhere around them. And they voiced their feelings by sadly observing, we ourselves are unable to rebuild the wall. When you lose strength and you lose vision, then you lose confidence. And if you lose confidence, then discouragement, real, long discouragement, is right around the corner. The Jews had built their wall to half its height because the people had a mind to work. The people had a heart to work. They lost their heart. They lost their confidence. When you lose your heart, you lose your motivation. This overwhelming feeling of, I can't do it anymore. I can't do it anymore. Loss of confidence. See, they had taken their eyes off of God and his faithfulness. They had taken their eyes off of God's promises. They had taken their eyes off of what Nehemiah had encouraged them to do. And here they were. They were just thinking about themselves and their physical state. They lost confidence and they realized, we can't do this. But part of the reason that they lost their confidence was because they were no longer looking to God for their help. The fourth thing that Judah brings is in verse 11, and our adversaries said, they will neither know nor see anything till we come into their midst and kill them. They lost their security. They lost their security. They were no longer confident that if they would go to sleep at night, that they would wake up alive. They were no longer sure that the Lord was going to protect them. Because the enemies, they've been listening to the voice of the enemy. The voice of the enemy kept saying that we will plan such a good plan that the Jews, they will have no idea what's going to happen to them. And one day we will just come in and we will kill them. And they forgot because they had their eyes turned to their own weakness, loss of confidence. Their eyes were no longer on God and God's promises and God's faithfulness. They turned their eyes to themselves. They said, we're not safe here. It's unsafe. And so they had a loss of strength, a loss of vision, a loss of confidence, and a loss of security. You know, if we are honest with ourselves, that's so often the road that leads us down to discouragement. We lose our physical strength. Maybe it's tiring. We've been working, trying to encourage this friend for so long already. We've sacrificed sleepless hours praying for them. We're tired. We're physically tired. When we see that it's just not help, that the friend is not responding, there's still so much that's missing in the friend's life. And then we forget about what this friend would be like if they would get a hold of Jesus in their lives. We forget and we just see the mess in their lives and we see all the discouraging things. And then we lose confidence. It's like, is this really worth it? Is it really going to help? And then we're discouraged. So how did Nehemiah deal with discouragement in the Jewish camp? He stopped the work and he remembered the purpose. See, there's builders, and we won't read for the rest of the chapter for the sake of time. Right now, all the builders are scattered throughout all over Jerusalem, and they're They are working with stones and water and concrete, yet they are separated from their families. And so Nehemiah stops the work, and he brings the families together, and he gives each one of them and reminds them of the purpose. See, we're bringing you families together, and remember, this wall is here for your good. The wall is here for your protection, for your safety. The wall is here for you. It's for your own good. He reminds them of the purpose of the wall, and he reminds them that one of the reasons that they need their wall is for the protection of your families. And so every morning when the husband gets up and his family is right around him and he feels discouraged by these rocks and all this garbage that is here, that he is reminded, oh, it's because of my little John, my little Tina, whatever their names were. It's my wife. This is why I'm building this wall. So their families were around them at all times. He was reminding them of the purpose. And we find that in verse 13. The second thing that he reminds them of, he reminds them to turn their attention away from all the hard work, away from all the rocks and the rubbish and all the garbage. He says, turn your attention back to the Lord. Remember the Lord, great and awesome. He challenges them to remember the Lord. Take your eyes off of this garbage, these rocks, and go back to the Lord. Because that's where your strength is coming from. That's where your strength is coming from. Remember the Lord, great and awesome. Fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. Remember that the Lord has said he will be with you. Remember how the Lord has brought us this far. Remember how quickly we have been able to build these first 20 feet of the wall. Remember the Lord's promises. Remember what God has done in your lives. As you're dealing with this friend, remember where you once were in your life and how the Lord came in and he changed your life and it is different now. Remember, turn your attention back to the Lord. The third thing he tells him is remember that life is a battle. Fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. We find this throughout the whole New Testament of how the writers in the New Testament are reminding us that this Christian life, it's not all easy, that there will be difficulties. We just need to look at the 12 disciples, and everyone except for John at some point in time were killed for their faith. It was a difficulty, tremendous difficulty. And Paul writes about his experiences as he goes out and he shares the gospel. How many times he was shipwrecked, beaten, and jailed. A lot of difficulty. A lot of difficulty. And so sometimes we just need to be reminded, life is a battle. Turn our attention to the Lord. Get the vision, the purpose back again, and understand that life is a battle. There are days when it will be hard. There's difficulties that come our way. And the last thing, don't battle alone. Verse 19, it says, Then I said to the nobles, the rulers, and the rest of the people, the work is great and extensive, and we are separated far from one another on the wall. Wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. The lesson I take out of this is don't battle alone. This rallying point, if they would see the enemy come, they were supposed to let someone know and they would blow a trumpet. And at that point in time, everyone was supposed to come to the sound of the blowing trumpet. There's a rallying point. We're going to get together to that particular spot. The principle that I take out of this is this, that you are never meant to live your life alone. You are not meant to battle your life alone. You need a friend. You need a Christian brother or sister in your life. You need a rallying brother or sister in your life. That you, when you find the walls of discouragement coming in, that you can go to and you blow the trumpet, meaning you tell them, I need prayer. I need encouragement. I feel like my strength is failing me. I see all the mess in this person's life that I'm working on. I've been trying to teach my Sunday school class how to sit quietly for 3 weeks already, and it's not working. I'm getting discouraged. I just see all the naughty children. You need a friend that's going to come around you and pray for you and tap you on your shoulder. I've been battling with this particular temptation for so long. I can't overcome it. I feel like I'm just failing in my life. You need a friend. And brother and sister, if you don't have a friend that will come alongside you and battle with you, you need to get on your knees and pray that the Lord would send a friend like that. Someone close to you that will battle with you. None of us is meant to battle alone. Life is a battle, but we are not meant to battle alone. Nehemiah in this story says, hey, if there's a breach in the wall and the enemy is coming, blow the trumpet, and all of us are going to get together and we're going to come to that sound and we're going to help. We're going to be there. So the lesson out of that is don't battle alone. When Elijah was being hunted down by Jezebel, he ran under a tree in the wilderness and said, Lord, take my life. It's not worth it. I'm all alone. What did God do? He brought food. Elijah was nourished, strengthened for 40 days and 40 nights. What was the next command that God gave Elijah? He says, Elijah, get up. You're not alone, Elijah. And I'm going to prove it to you. Go over to this land and anoint Elisha, and you will have a companion that will travel with you. That was the next thing. Elijah says, I'm alone. God says, I'll feed you for a while, but then the next thing is to go and anoint Elisha. I'm going to prove to you that you're not alone. You're not meant to walk alone. And Elijah and Elisha were walking together after that for the rest of Elijah's life. When David was under Saul's jealous scrutiny, God gave David a friend, Jonathan, and David loved each other because of a marvelous bond. Their souls were linked together, the Bible teaches us. Discouragement seldom impacted David's life because of that friendship that he had, that soul friend that he had. Nehemiah said, and I'm just kind of gleaning this lesson here, let's not just sit around and lick our own wounds. We need to help. We need help from one another. Let's go about the business of caring. Let's serve. Let's minister. And if I'm about ready to give up, let's go to that Christian friend, brother or sister in our life, and have them pray and encourage us, and then let's move on. So I don't know whether or not discouragement is part of the church here at Winkler, but in my experience, it seems to be part of every Christian's experience. There are times where we are discouraged. And often discouragement is a result of loss of vision, and a loss of confidence, loss of security. And my prayer is that these suggestions that Nehemiah had for the Jewish people to remember the Lord and to remember the purpose and to remember that life is a battle. Just because you're facing something difficult in your life, you're facing an discouraging situation right now, does not mean that the Lord isn't with you. The Lord was with the Jewish people just as much this day that they were facing their discouragement as he had been the previous days. And we read the rest of just a few chapters later that they completed the wall in record time. God was with them. God blessed their work. But they had to be encouraged in the Lord and not focus on the things that the enemy would have so longed for them to focus on, which was on the earthly and their own strength. So may the Lord bless you as you minister. May the Lord be with you as you interact with other people. May the Lord encourage you. And if you do go through a discouraging time, remember, sometimes it's okay to stop the work for a little while and get nourishment, strength, refocus. Remember the vision. Remember the Lord. Remember his promises. And go and ask a friend to help you, pray for you, and walk with you. Let's pray. Lord, we want to come to you at the close of this service. We thank you for your word, and we thank you for the lessons that we can pull out of an Old Testament book like Nehemiah. And we pray that as we go through life and we are faced with challenging situations, whatever they might be this morning, God, I pray that you would help us to not live with discouragement, that we would be encouraged, and that we would continue to work so that you can bless us in our lives, just like you blessed your the Jewish people here with this task. Father, I pray that you'd bless this congregation and strengthen them in their day-to-day walk and their day-to-day battles. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.